Welcome back, fellow Jazz Bums. Today we have Steve Okonski and Terry Cole from Colemine Records. We're going to be talking about Steve's new record, Entrance Music. Thanks for joining us, guys. Felipe, you want to get us started?
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Terry, for joining us today. Pleasure to have you here. Yes, Steve Okonski, a piano organ player, has been with the Duran Jones in the Indications, has his own solo records as well, which we're going to talk about today. And Terry Cole from Colemine Records, Playroom Records, label, musician, record store. So we're going to go over a little bit of everything here, have a nice chat with them today. Hope you guys enjoy. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure.
So awesome. We're gonna do this one a little bit different. I think let's talk about the record first, and then we can kind of go back into your history and that sort of thing, Steve. Let me share my screen real quick. I just wanted to show everybody what record we're talking about. So your new record, Okonski Entrance Music. You're on piano. You got Michael Montgomery on bass, and then Aaron Frazier on drums. First of all, when will this be available, and where should people order it from?
The record comes out February 28th, and I encourage everyone to try to go to their local record stores to pick it up. But failing that, you can go to Colemine Records and get it there. But yeah, check with your local record stores first.
Yeah, it's coming. I mean, we have been listening to the record. Really great achievement. I think it was a nice follow-up to Magnolia. In case anybody hasn't bought Magnolia yet, here's Magnolia.
Mm.
And,
that's great.
And to me, I mean, my first contact with Magnolia was interesting. I was just flipping to the Bandcamp, new music, whatever, and I just bought it. I said, well, it looks like a Tony Williams cover. I'm gonna buy this record. It should be good. And when I played, I was just like, oh my gosh, the sound quality is so good to start with, and then the music felt like compelling, very like kind of drags you in. You play the record over and over again, and then I just kept following. And then when Entrance Music was announced, I immediately had to hit Steve and ask more about it. So what changed from Magnolia to Entrance Music, or nothing at all?
I mean, the trio is the same. I think the way that we approached it recording wise was similar, though in a different venue in Loveland. The first record we recorded above Plaid Room in the Colemine HQ, and this new record was at the Portage Lounge where Terry's at right now. But all similar gear, and even between the two recording sessions, I think like personally a lot changed. I mean, I had already moved to North Carolina, but had really settled in at this point. And we were well post COVID. But as far as approaching the session, aside from the venue being slightly different, I think we tried to go into it with a very similar mindset, but maybe slightly more comfortable knowing that what we did worked last time, and so we felt maybe a little bit more comfy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Terry, you produced the record, right? The second one?
Yeah. Steve and I both produced it.
And the first one.
Yeah.
And the first one too? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Great.
But I think, the process was pretty similar. Really just like, going in, letting them play, letting Steve do the, find the good bits, and then, mixing it. It's pretty easy record to mix, though.
Yeah, how was it recorded? Were y'all all just playing together in a single room, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think Entrance Music might have had one extra mic, but I think maybe 5 mics total: piano, bass, room, kick, overhead.
Yeah, sounds right.
And it's I mean, it's not a small room, but it's certainly not a big room. And we're all close, no cans, and just playing and recording. And then I mean, the room mic is really what's doing 80% of the work for these recordings. So a lot of it, I mean, because a lot of what we're doing is of the moment, we've really got to be listening and be able to hear each other. So a lot of what we're doing is really in response. And I think that's a little more difficult to do when you're isolated or you've got cans on, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that is like the sort of like touchstone of the record is like the emotive sort of nature of it, and that comes from everyone listening and responding again, and following each other. And yeah, I think like Steve said, the room mic that's usually like pretty high above the drum kit is getting a lot of everything. And that's really like, when you take that out of the mix, it's not sterile, but it's like, that's the record essentially, is that one mic. So
wow, that's cool. Steve, can you talk about like the concept of the record and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we went into it, I mean, very much very similar to how we did Magnolia. The concept kind of just being, let's try to go with no preconceived notions and just play. And we had 5 days blocked off, and knowing that there would be ups and downs and productivity. And yeah, I mean, concept is probably too lofty of a term for what we had. It was just kind of go in there and play and see what we could come up with. And like, we do a lot of listening too. So, we'll be in that room that Terry's in there and just go through different influences, stuff we like, and then kind of get in a mood, and then go into the live room and just start playing, and kind of see what we come up with. So yeah, I don't know if there was like a set concept other than like a direction we wanted to follow of let's keep it open and try not to have too much preordained.
I think the only thing that was like slightly different going into it was, I think, I mean, it's pretty subtle, but I think we were trying to have a couple tunes that were a little bit more drums up, like a little bit more, slightly more beat influence. Cause the first session, like the very first time they all came, that session was a very different vibe than what became Magnolia. And so I think we were trying to pull like 10% more of that type of influence in. I mean, it's pretty subtle. I think when you listen to the final product, it's like they're pretty similar. But I think that was like the only major difference I remember talking about going into it, was like trying to pull a little bit, but also not, we really liked what we made the first time. So it was like, let's do it again.
Let's keep the trend. Yeah.
And
I think improvisation is one of the main features, right? Characteristics of the trio playing. However, in this record, I mean, you put out the first single, which was October. Beautiful song, the opening. And then you put Dahlia now as the second one. And Dahlia is a more like structured song written. So how did this song come about?
Dahlia is definitely the most composed piece of either album. And that I think was recorded on maybe the last day. And we were listening to I mean, we were kind of not running out of ideas, but we're trying to do something different. And after doing a lot of listening, we sat down and tried to, this was very collaborative. We're all trying to write something together. So as far as like, the hits at the beginning are obviously, it's still a fair amount of improvisation, and you can kind of hear that with how I don't play the melody the same at the top and at the end, because I'm trying to remember what we were doing. Because we didn't we got the hits down and we had the basic form, but that's the most we had going into it. So as far as things like melody and improvisation and like the solo section and that, it's all very loose on what's going to happen. And so that's kind of the one common thread, I think, to the rest of the album, or the other songs that we have. It is still very loose, but it was fun to kind of put together some tight hits and feel that form kind of push and pull as we get more excited in the session.
I think like the push and pull and like the not tension's the wrong word, but like you can kind of feel like so many of my favorite records kind of feel like maybe they might go off the rails at any, they're like, like it could. And when it doesn't, you're like, damn, that's cool. And I think, I don't think there was ever a risk of really anything going off the rails or anything, but there is like an element of like discovery, I guess is a word that comes up. I think when I listen to the record, like everyone is discovering the melody and everyone is discovering the changes in the mood, and capturing that, I think, is like the magic. Because I think if they would have done like 4 takes or 5 takes, it's like, okay, it's done to death now at some point.
Yeah, I listened to the record a couple of times, or probably 3 times over the last 24 hours. Found it really beautiful and relaxing and easy to connect with. We talked about the one song, but there's 9 original compositions here. Can you talk about like who wrote the songs? Did you bring some of these with you? Were they all group, just kind of compositions on the fly? Like, how did that work?
So 9 songs, 8 of them are as a trio. The last one's just solo piano. And so that was just me, obviously. But the rest of them are all co-written by the 3 of us. At most, I'll kind of start a session with a rough idea of like, say, like October, like kind of that B melody sort of thing. Like I had that there and I knew it was going to be an E flat. But from there, I mean, I don't tell Mike what to play. I don't tell Aaron I don't tell anyone what to play. I hire him. I mean, we play together because I trust them and I know they're going to do the best thing. So it feels very much like we all kind of brought that together. And like, in Summer Storm, there's that B section that's very open and I don't know, florally. And that is something that I kind of came up with on a break, but I knew I wanted that in there. And then I knew, okay, let's have the rest be in B flat. And from there, we just kind of go with it. And so that's kind of the way that everything works. Lake Bridge opens up with some hits. So we knew we wanted to do something in E. We knew we wanted to be pretty open. We're like, let's do something different. And probably like what Terry was talking about, bringing 10% more of like a not boom bat, but like a beat based thing. Let's like have some structured hits. That's easy to do and still keep it very open in the middle. And so, yeah, to answer your question, everything is co-written by the 3 of us.
That's great.
That's cool.
You can tell that you're all listening to each other and doing this together, but I don't know. It doesn't come. I don't get the. I didn't really understand the complete improvisation that was happening. Right, like it came together so well that I would have believed y'all could have rehearsed all this stuff and like had it down because it felt really tight. You know what I mean?
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I mean that. Thank you. That's cool.
I think that's like years of playing together. So you're like sort of like you guys at this point just sort of speak a different language. Like, oh yeah, I know this, and a lot of the same references. And I think the 3 of them have such like a deep like reference vocabulary that somebody can play something and immediately someone else can like just pick it up and it's going to be seamless. So
that's cool.
And I just take naps in the control room and I'm just
that's great, guys. Good.
Just gonna make sure I hit stop.
Yeah, exactly.
And record. I got to hit record at the beginning too.
Yeah, that's the most important one is to hit record, right?
I do both.
Although an Easter egg on Magnolia on Song for My Sister's Son, you will hear a Hammond organ in the very distance, and that's Terry playing that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that is very far back, but you can hear it especially at the end, and it makes the record.
Yeah, it is pretty far back there because I think that was like the last. That was kind of not the genesis, but like that. Those couple songs were like the last songs we did from the very first session that sort of opened the door to the second session, which became Magnolia. And it was, I think I was like listening to like a Mulatu thing, and I was like, let's just go play an E chord for like 12 minutes. And, yeah.
Cool.
That's pretty
that was
cool.
fun. And I believe my dog, that take was like at 2 or 3 in the morning or something. And I think on the actual tape, my dog was like, he tries to hang as long as possible. Like he wants to be involved. And I believe that the noise was keeping him asleep of them playing. And when we stopped playing that song, like right when we got done playing and everybody stopped, he like woke up and was like started barking like, whoa, where have I been? What's going on? And that'll be on the extended box set in 20 years.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So every point is everyone's taking naps now and again during the session.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, right there.
You just make it easy. So, also from what I understand, this this second record, you also, I mean, of course, you went to a new studio and also a new tape machine as well, right?
Same tape machine. I think I might have been it was definitely like overhauled for sure, but the same. I have two. I don't know which one it was, but it was a Tascam 388. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
The best VCR ever. Yeah, but yeah, it's same thing we used for the first one. I think the only thing we figured out from the very first session and then to the Magnolia session was, I think, the noise reduction. I think that was like the thing. And now I'm back. I just recorded this week, and I was like, now I'm back on taking noise reduction off. I'm like, nah, I don't want that noise reduction on there. But there's definitely, it's funny listening to the very first demos that they did. They do have a different texture to them. But I think Magnolia and Entrance Music, both, we were trying to land in that like mid-fi, you know, that like mid-fidelity sort of space. I think we did it. Feel pretty good.
I mean, yes, sonic-wise, I really like the instruments are very clear, separated, but it's not a clinical precision. There's some grit to it, which I really love. This kind of room feeling, and I think goes along with your influences, right? When you start the label with the Deptone and Stone Throw, that kind of sound that you mentioned. I think it has that grit, that human thing there. It's really, I think, really compelling in both records. I really enjoy what I heard. I haven't even heard of the vinyl of Entrance Music, just Magnolia yet, but let's see. I'm really curious to actually hear the vinyl of
for sure.
Well,
I think, I think my very frank qualm with a lot of contemporary jazz is that like everyone worships Rudy Van Gelder and praises Blue Note and Prestige and these classic recordings, but like it seems to me that contemporarily there's not really been any sort of concerted effort to like attempt to employ those types of production techniques, instead it's sort of followed technology, which is like the most tracks, the highest fidelity, the most isolation, the most perfect recording. And I mean, those records that I like to listen to are certainly not perfect. They're cut hot to like 4 tracks, everybody in Rudy Van Gelder's parents' apartment. It's like it's not nice, but it's fun it's like an enjoyable listen, because it just feels like
you're warm.
It's like you're there. You don't feel like you're in a doctor's office or something, like listening to everything perfectly isolated.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why I enjoy the sessions like this one where you're all recording together in a single room, because I feel like that reproduces a lot of that, right? And you're not losing, like you talk about the room mic being the whole record. That makes sense to me, because the blending and bleeding and all that is what to me gives you the realism, right? So Terry, tell us how you decided to create a record label and how long you've been at it, and like kind of what your goal with the label is, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is like officially year 18 of doing this. The first like 8, I was a school teacher, teaching high school biology. But yeah, I was just very inspired by, I was fascinated with like Blue Note and Atlantic historically, like those two in particular. And then when I learned about Daptone and Truth and Soul and these folks in New York making soul records that sounded like they were late 60s records contemporarily, I was like, I want to figure out how to do this. And a lot of my discovery as far as like soul and R&B and jazz and funk came through the lens of hip hop. And so that's sort of how I, sample sources is how I got into a lot of that music originally. And but yeah, the goal with the label's always been the same: just make cool records with cool people. And that's it. Get rich, die trying.
Yeah. It's been very successful. I have friends in Brazil who collect records and buy stuff. I take Colemine records to them. there's a lot of Devon Lamar trio fans in Brazil. I always take records there, always.
Yeah, I think that was, the Delvon stuff. Honestly, that was like the first. That was the sort of the same thing. It was like there's a lot of organists on the scene at that time, but not. I don't know, like no one making, like, trying to go right at a certain, like, old school particular style of production and like design approach. And so, like, I made no qualms about, like, I'm gonna rip off Reed Miles, like, right at his face, just like right at that. And but I think, when Steve and I started talking about, but yeah, that's the goal with the label, is to make records that I like, and I hope other people will like, with people that are nice and kind, and that's really it. And I've been really lucky to have, like, great artists and talented folks that have trusted me with their records, and I have a wonderful staff and family that works for me. It's just like, yeah, it's not real. It doesn't feel real.
Cool.
But yeah, and when Steve, I think we started talking about, I think Steve's stuff sort of was an extension of originally, like, the Flying Stars, kind of. Like, I think there was there's a 45 we put out in, like, 2017 that was Aaron Fraser. Steve was playing piano or organ or both.
Organ, yeah.
And co-wrote one of the tunes, and it was a gospel, like a lo-fi gospel song, 45. And then they were in Loveland, I think, with the Indications, and we, like, I don't know, we were playing and just talking about, like, oh man, it'd be fun to do some, like, instrumental-ish, gospel-ish type of things. And that sort of evolved into this conversation with Steve and I about, like, making some jazz records or jazz leaning records. And yeah, just sort of evolved and found a life of its own eventually. And it's been pretty cool to see, people respond so positively to it. And it just feels, I'm very proud of both records, and everything about them. The art on the first one was done by one of the Natalie, who works at the record store. And I don't know, it just feels very homegrown and organic.
So Steve, so tell us a little more about your background, how you became a piano player, all the sort of stuff, what you like to listen to back then, how things evolved for you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it somewhat condensed. I started.
You don't have to.
Piano.
You can talk as long as you want. It's all good. Let's give it all.
I started playing piano pretty young. I think I was around 5. My dad brought in a piano that someone was throwing away, and it was a big old upright Grinnell Brothers piano from Detroit, probably turn of the century. And I took lessons from the lady down the street, and did that until just classical piano lessons with various levels of enthusiasm, until I was around, like, 13 or 14, and I wasn't really going anywhere with it, but something clicked at that point to where I really started to enjoy it, got better faster, but still only playing classical music. And I would sit down and, like, play, like, improvise, but I didn't know, not in any sort of, like, genre. It was just playing because it sounded nice. And so then I went to, so this is in Michigan, I went to Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti for classical piano, and did 2 years of that. And in the second year, I started, like, I'd always listened to jazz, and I loved it. And I was really hot on listening to like Hammond organ jazz. And so I started taking so Eastern didn't offer a jazz program. I started taking lessons with a teacher there, just, like, on the side. And he was really supportive, and he would, like, book local gigs in town with students. And I always remember trying to get asked to do a gig. Like, that was when you knew you kind of not made it, but, like, how you were good enough, like, you reached a certain level, is when Mark Pappas would ask you to, like, go play at the Village Inn for 2 hours doing standards to nobody. No one would show up, but it would, like, feel good to do it with some sort of pressure.
Absolutely.
So, from there, I graduated, but just with a communications degree, moved to New York. And then didn't play music for a while. I took some classes at City College studying jazz there, but mostly to meet people, and did, like, a Hammond organ, like, as, like, residency thing up in Harlem, where we would get people from like City College and Manhattan School of Music come in and sitting in, and it was really fun. And then didn't play music for a while, and then ended up meeting Aaron Fraser through our good friend Wyndham. We basically met at the Jalopy Tavern in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and we started playing together a ton, just Friday night bar gigs, and then that happened to turn into like 2 or 3 nights a week. And then when Duran Jones and the Indications were releasing their first record around 2017 and going on the road, their original keyboardist wasn't able to make it, and so Aaron asked if I would. And at this point, he had told me about the Indications, and I had heard some of the record, but I knew what they were doing. And as soon as he asked if I would go out with him, I jumped on it for sure.
Who are some of your like influences for piano, or actually Hammond organ? You said Hammond organ. Like, who are your favorite organ players?
I think Don Patterson is number one for me. There's an album he does with Sonny Stitt and Billy James. Sonny Stitt's on the electric saxophone. He's got like one of those like Hammond looking things on it. Live at the Left Bank. It's phenomenal. Don Patterson is probably like number one to me. Groove Holmes is way up there. But then piano wise, Red Garland is probably close to number one. I mean, it's hard not to just like list all of everybody, you know, Bill Evans, Bud Powell, Vince Guaraldi, some of his stuff with like the Cal Jader quartet, like the Peanut stuff is cool, and it definitely like seeped in, but his more like straight ahead stuff like blows my mind. He's doing like crazy contrapuntal stuff, and super inspiring. But yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on. Contemporarily, I mean, the Bad Plus, I got one of their albums when I was in high school, and it kind of blew my mind. And like, I didn't like it the first time, but there was something that kept me coming back to it. And so just hearing how they could be like a piano trio that like you're tricking people into liking jazz. And I think like I wanted to keep that going somehow. I think people end up listening to Magnolia or entrance music, and they like it, and then you tell them it's jazz, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know I liked that." And I mean, I think some people would probably argue that it's not, and that's not for me to decide. But at least people are talking about it.
That was an actual debate on the hype sticker. We were like, should we call it jazz? And then I was like, I hope it pisses a bunch of people off. Let's call it jazz. This is great. Yeah, it's a weird thing. There's a weird like, I don't know. I don't know what else you would call it. That's what it has to be, I think.
I think so.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you guys are very friendly debaters. Let's open it up to the crowd.
Well, I'm sure if anyone disagrees that watches this, they'll definitely let us all know in the comments.
Absolutely.
There's that one guy out there. He really hates how I recorded the piano on the first record. That one guy. I'll lose sleep over that guy.
Yeah.
He said it sounded like a cheap upright. I was like, well,
that's actually very astute of you.
That's pretty good. You got a pretty good ear there, sir. It's a cheap upright.
Oh man.
But I think it was like, wasn't it? It was probably like the first time you came to play. Like you did a couple tours of the Indications, and then it was like probably 2018 or 2019 maybe that we like jammed upstairs at some point.
I think that was 27. That was maybe 2018, not 2019. I don't think, but yeah, it was super early on. And I think you would talk to Aaron about doing something more in this Flying Stars vein. And Aaron talked to me about it, but he said, yeah, Terry wants you to bring some of your songs. I don't know where like the break, I don't know if it was like an intentional miscommunication or just a regular communication. I was like, oh dang, well, yeah, I've definitely got some stuff that we could do. And so, Aaron and I had been playing together for so long that, we had endless sound checks and empty spaces that we just like, I've always got like something I'm working on that we'll play together. And so it's pretty, and like and just relating it back to Magnolian music in this project, whenever we're at our instruments, we come up with something pretty immediately. And I think we also, and I don't know how I'm getting off on this, so you can stop me at any time, but I think Aaron particularly, but Mike and I as well, are very conscious of like keeping things keeping the crowd engaged and entertained, and not kind of going off and trying to like chop out, and like it's more to feel good than to impress, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
So
yeah, and I think that goes a lot to like the accessibility of it. You know, like when back to what you said about people being like, I didn't even know I like jazz. You know, I think it's because of that. It's like, oh, these melodies are singable and memorable, and the performances are emotive and compelling. And you know, it's not like I'm playing for me and me only. You know, it's not, and that's okay. I prefer that because I am not that. So I'm
right. No, I mean, I guess there's a place for everything, right? But
sure.
When you're trying to me, it's I mean, I'm not a jazz artist, but it would seem to me like definitely engaging with each other is like the motive, but engaging with the audience would seem to make sense. Like otherwise, what are you doing, right? You're just like, hey, check me out, and we don't care if you like it or not. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I think that's also a very prevalent attitude.
Is it?
It's like, I'm gonna make, like, again, I don't want to make it sound like we're pandering to an audience, but we're trying to we're making music that we like and that we think other people would like. And I think it's a very punk attitude, which is not bad, to be like, we're gonna make the music we like and you're gonna like it regardless. Like,
sure.
Like, we're gonna force, like, and I think some people do like stuff that's really choppy out. I mean, I love the Don Patterson stuff. That dude plays faster than anybody before Joey D, and it's very impressive and very choppy. But I love listening to that. I can't play that, so I'm not going to try.
Right.
But yeah, I think that idea of, like, you know, you guys, I'm like, I don't care if you like it or not, it's a cool, like, punk attitude, but just not one that I think, well, I certainly don't have.
Yeah, I've never thought about this label as like, I guess I do think about that label like this. I only put out stuff that I like. However, I think my palette is like not so wild that there are at least a few hundred people that might also agree with it. But I mean, yeah, it's a balance, right? It's a balance between like, yeah, you're not pandering or anything like that. Just like, hey, we like making this stuff, and hopefully you will feel good, and if you feel good, we will feel good, and round we go.
Symbiotic.
Yeah. Do you think, Steve, also like playing and touring and recording with the more like a soul band, bigger band, kind of helps you in that regard, like being, you know, more like engaging, more, you know, more open to the audience and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, playing with, you know, the Indications since, you know, 2017, and just the stages and the kind of rooms we've played now compared to then. I mean, you see in every facet, and trying to figure out the difference of, you know, playing to 100 people and playing to 1,000 people. And, you know, are you on a stage? Are you on the floor? Or is there a balcony? Like, it's undoubtedly helped. And part of that too is just putting in the hours and hours and years, like, of playing with Aaron and Mike for you know, that project while he was in it. And yeah, you see what people respond to. I mean, obviously there's no vocals, but you can kind of see like a push and pull in what people respond to. And I think some of that is, like, you know, being behind Durand for so long, and he's such a showman in addition to being such an incredible musician. Like, I can see how he works the crowd dynamically, and when he goes up and when he goes down, and when he's silent, and what kind of pauses he uses. That definitely is inspiring, and like I said, you know, seep into, I think, all of our musicality.
So yeah, another question. So you did like 2 trio records. Do you intend to keep it at this format, or thinking, maybe doing a quartet, quintet, or solo, or different things as well?
Yeah, we've already had a recording session for a potential third LP, and that's with steel guitar,
Oh, cool.
which went really, really well, and I'm excited to kind of dig into that and see what we've got. It's with our pal Johnny Lamb, who's a phenomenal musician, and it's an idea I've had for a while, putting that texture of the pedal steel in, because it just the ethereal atmospheric quality that it can have floats so well with what we're doing, and it really it's a different thing for sure, but the through line is very strong, and I'm excited for people to hear that. I'm excited to like figure out exactly what it is, what we have, but so, and I mean, in the future, I think definitely making it bigger. Like I just did a album release gig a couple nights ago at the local record store here, with local musicians, and had a tenor saxophonist who also played bass clarinet, which I had never imagined before. And he played that on some of the more like Song for My Sister's Son and Lake Bridge, and was just lacing it in and out, and it sounded awesome. And so I think yeah, I definitely could see trying to do more and getting bigger, if only because it's fun to bring more people into this mix. The more people you bring, the kind of more difficult it is to keep things entirely improvisational, though, without it kind of going off the rails pretty quick. And so, like, I know we could do it, the three of us. Even with the fourth member for this last session, things had to be a little tighter in what we were working with. But I'm excited to kind of explore that more. As far as solo piano, like probably not, unless like a solo piano album would probably only come about from like the clippings of previous sessions where it's like, all right, we got a little bit of tape left. I mean, that's how the last song of this album came out. I think it was the last thing that we did in the session where it's like, all right, just sit down and like do something like this or do something like that. I think this was no prompt, just do it. There was one that got cut that was like a solo, like Randy Newman style thing that was like 95% there. It was so close, but I didn't feel comfortable with the other 5%. But I think it'd be tough for me to like sit down and do like a solo piano record. But not to say it wouldn't happen, but it'd be different.
I really like both I mean, the one that got cut and the one that made the record, like they're both sweet. But they're good. They're like, it's a really nice, like, bookend. I think I would, if I was listening to a whole record of just like, that's a lot of pressure melodically, harmonically, compositionally yeah. But yeah, I think you guys did a great job in the last session of, having another harmony instrument obviously brings, that's, because when it's just you can drive the ship harmonically, and when you have another pedal steel there. But luckily pedal steel is sort of like, it can duck, it can duck in and out very easily. And it's like, if you guys weren't ethereal enough, just add pedal steel. It's even more crazy.
Well, you brought up bass clarinet. That's my favorite jazz instrument. So yeah, definitely think about adding that to the mix at some point. It's so great, man. It's such a versatile sound, right? Like the range of that instrument's crazy.
Definitely. Yeah, it's very emotive.
That's cool.
So, I mean, of course, Terry, you own a record shop, a label. You're probably a record collector. So what about yourself, Steve? Do you collect records? Do you listen to vinyl? How is your relationship with the media?
I definitely listen to vinyl. I wouldn't say like I'm definitely not a collector, but I buy vinyl. Like there isn't something I want to be like a completionist of or anything, but yeah, I love buying albums. Absolutely. I think like probably my favorite thing to look for is jazz. I think it also kind of, it's like it lends itself a little better to digging because so many people played with each other, and so you can look on the back and you can see, this, like, this guy's on this, and then what else is he on, and then like what albums has he led, and it's really easy to follow wormholes to different albums, where I guess you can kind of do the same thing with soul and R&B, but maybe it's a little bit more label based than it is like individual player based. But I love listening to records. It's probably my favorite way to listen.
Well, that's one of the things that really, once I got sucked into jazz, that was the thing that really got a hold of me, was just, discovery and finding new players. And then, you see a record that has two guys you really like on it, but you don't know the other three guys. You buy that and you're like, oh, this dude's awesome. You start buying that dude's shit. And then before you know it, you have 3,000 jazz records and you wonder what you're doing with your life. But,
man, you know what I think about a lot, and I've tried to do it a couple of times, but Mike Montgomery, who played bass on this, turned me onto it. He was telling me that he would buy solo piano records and play along and like play bass to them to learn to get better. And I was like, that is such a genius. Like, you've got like not just anything without a bass. And so you try to play piano along the Sonny Rollins record, it gets pretty tough pretty quick. But just that idea of like finding an album that doesn't have your instrument on it and trying to lace it in is pretty genius. I never thought of that.
I think, were there some records in it was either the 60s or 70s, they were like jazz records that you could like pan hard left or hard right, and it would knock out certain instruments. Like you could pan, like they were meant to like be played along with. Like, you'd have like Watermelon Man and pan left and like piano goes away, or you pan right and the bass goes away, so that you could like practice with it.
Yeah, they also had a bunch of records that were just like a quartet minus the horn, right?
Yeah.
You could, and some people just listen to those records and they're like, "Hey, this is great," but the meaning was for someone to come along and play along with it and do their thing, which is cool.
Props to the players just holding it down without like, if it's that good to where you don't need anything else on top, they were killing it. That's great.
I was gonna say Sonny didn't leave you much room though when he was playing without a piano.
That's what I'm saying. It didn't go well. That's why I haven't really done it that much.
Did you feel like peeping over your shoulder, like, what are you doing, man?
I got the tap very early on and went back and sat down.
Yeah, I think Good.
I was gonna say I really have gotten into like duets. There's so much room for each player to really contribute, and I'm trying to think of one that there was one. I think it was Jim Hall and Ron Carter. They've actually done several, but I can't remember the name of it now, but that one's crazy because they would switch roles within the songs. Like, Jim Hall or Ron Carter would be walking the bass along while Jim's solo, and then suddenly it would switch where, Ron's just like leading the whole thing. And then, Jim's just like a rhythm guitarist, just and the interplay with those. Anyway, I've really enjoyed that format a lot lately. A lot of cool free jazz stuff that's just two players, and like was it Interstellar Space with Coltrane and Rashid Ali. I've been getting into that. I mean, that's a crazy record, but for some reason that format I've just really enjoyed lately.
I mean, that Jim Hall Bill Evans record is like
Undercurrents.
I mean,
that's
also like, in my opinion, one of the coolest, darkest covers of all time.
And no words. That's such a move.
That shit is mean. Like, that album cover is like, if you told me that was like early 2000s emo band, I'd be like, yeah, check this out. Yeah,
exactly.
I get it. She's underwater. She's not happy. Not having a good time.
Maybe she's gonna be happy now that she's underwater, right? That's the other.
Yeah, maybe she's gonna reach a higher plane. I don't know, but man, that record's that one. I think about that one all the time because that one is just so. I mean, so much Bill Evans stuff is like ethereal and like just very, very emotive.
Yeah. So Terry, what are some of your favorite things to listen to? Your favorite records? Something that really speaks to you.
I don't have that many records anymore. I've only got like a couple hundred probably because I sold them all to start the record store, and then and now I'm definitely way more like. Not choosy, but like definitely more particular about like what I buy and I guess having the record store might have like, I don't know. I don't want to say it took the magic away because it didn't. I still love them, but it's like they're less precious because I'm just surrounded by them all the time, and so it's a little bit more like, oh yeah, if I really want that, I'll get it. Lately, I'm like back on my like David Axelrod tip again. It's that time of year, so I'm just listening to scary David Axelrod music. That's about it. But I love, I'm always chasing like his drum tone. That's what I spent all Tuesday doing, was like trying to get drums that sound like they were in a gigantic Capitol Studio A in a 8-foot ceiling room somehow. So yeah, I'm obsessed with that stuff. But so much of that also comes down to like, the players, and I am very lucky to get to work with all these really talented musicians, and yeah, it's cool. It's fun. I just love making records. Like I love the whole process. I love producing the records and mixing them and coming up with the artwork aesthetic. And we finally actually like physically saw Steve's new record a couple weeks ago, and it was just like, oh my gosh, it's just such a good, like, that feeling never gets old for me. It's just like, what's right here? Look at this thing. And like, so much more real than it just I don't know, there's something about it, the physicality. It's like reading a book.
It's the intentional listening aspect of it for me, especially with records. I mean, I like CDs too. I've been buying a lot of CDs over the last year, but you put it on, I listen to the whole thing. I'm not like, just so much different than streaming where you listen to a track and you got a playlist and it's just kind of in one ear and out the other because it's just playing forever. And it's, I don't know. I can gauge it as a music.
Yeah, I love the idea of like side at a time, like a side at a time versus, and also like people sometimes complain about our records being short, but like I like it. I think it's fun because then you're like, oh, it's over. Oh, well, I'll listen to it again. And when you think about records historically, like so many great records are like between 30 and 35 minutes, and or 25 and 30 minutes, And but I think the 90s and 2000s ruined a lot of people for that. Their standard became like 55 or 18 tracks, 55 minutes, 60 minutes, and it's like, that's a lot.
Yeah,
it is a lot.
With the hidden track at the end, right?
Yeah, you need 18 tracks plus a 12-minute bonus cut that actually comes in 13 minutes in. You have to fill up that 80 minutes.
Now, I noticed that a lot because I've got a couple thousand jazz records, like I said, but I've been listening to them I've only been into the music for about 4 or 5 years now, but I've listened to like 6 hours of jazz a day probably, right? Like when I'm working and I'm not in a meeting and even I'm just listening. And yeah, the difference between like even a 40-minute LP and like a 70-minute CD is insane, right? Like you might like a CD, but about a minute 50, you're like, okay, I get what y'all are doing, but I'm kind of ready for a different taste of something else.
It's a thing. It's a real thing, and it's like I still observe like pop records. That's still sort of the expectation, is like to make a 50-minute or a 55-minute thing. And then you end up in the vinyl format, you end up in no man's land.
Yeah, like 3-sided monster.
Yeah, or a 4-sided cut at 45, and all you're doing is flipping the record. And I'm like, nah, man, 35. That's 35 is like, you get into 43, you better be dark side of the moon. You better be
right. Well, and technically on an LP that's shorter like that, it's going to sound better because you're not getting into the inner part of the record as much, right?
100%. I just sent a record off that's like 28 minutes. It might be my own, and I was like, cut it loud because I know it's short.
Yeah,
like take up all that space. Eat it up.
You got room, exactly. 100%. Yeah.
No, for sure. I have a question about the analog thing. I mean, records are so hot these days. Even like cassette tapes, CDs are kind of, to the sideline a little bit. So do you see this, you've been with the label in a store for like 15 years or more. So do you see like we are this thing is stable, is going to continue, the thing is going to, people are going to forget about it? How do you feel about people's relationship and expectations with vinyl and other analog formats?
I think it's definitely here to stay to some degree. I don't think it's going to continue to grow and scale like it has. When you think about, I think more people are going to continue to get into it. People are going to step out of it, but I think it's not practical or frugal, and yet people still buy them. So that tells me that there's something compelling about the format, because it's not good for your wallet or your real estate or relationships or most of anything, other than it's really enjoyable, amazing format. So I think it's established itself, and the people that love it are going to continue to love it. I don't think it's ever going to be like mainstream, and I think a lot of pop records that we sell, they're not necessarily because people are listening to them. It's their totems of fandom. It's that person's way of supporting that artist that they love, or the artwork, or whatever it is. It's their way of being like, I love this person and this record, and I want to have a totem of it, because you don't have that on the DSPs. You don't have that in, you don't own what your music on Spotify is.
Right.
It can be taken away at any moment. So I think, but it is really cool to see. During the pandemic, we saw a massive uptick, like crazy. 2021 and 2020 were just unhinged as far as like sales and things go. And now it's kind of settled back, I think, to a normal where it would have been if it would have stayed on the course pre-pandemic. And I think it's in a great spot. It's healthy, but it's never gonna, like a big record for us is selling like 20 or 30,000 units. That's that's pretty damn big.
Yeah.
But the type of work or marketing that would have to go into selling 100,000 is like crazy. Like if that makes any sense. Like the scalability of it is just like, to make that next big step up, it's like something really big has to happen. And so, and I've definitely have the attitude lately of like, I like making smaller numbers and making things a little more special and DIY and sort of like get it while it's here, because it might not always be here, because we're going to go on to the next one, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
true. Yeah.
I think it is here to stay to a degree. I don't, but it is really fun seeing young people still get into it. That happens every day.
Yes.
Yeah. All the record stores around me have young people in them whenever I go, which is nice to see.
It's great. Like that's
old guys fighting over records and trying to protect their little piece of the world.
Yeah, which is like, it's such a strange thing to me, to be like, you don't know anything about records. Back when I was a kid, it's like, okay, bub, like, why do you care? Why does this affect you negatively in any sort of way? I will say, I'll tell you my favorite story about like records and like jazz discovery. I would say, as a person who, I started selling records on eBay, I was like 12. I was selling 78s. And so as a person who's been around records my whole life, I'm kind of numb. Like I've gone through the stage of like being that guy, being like the gate. I've gone through that. Now I'm on the other side of it. Now I'm just like, I'm like a Gandalf age. I've just been around records. They're just been around. And so I that attitude of being like too cool to turn people on to things, or like trying to act like something that someone else does, like it's a huge turnoff. And I think record stores historically are big perpetrators of like the record store snobbery, or like superiority complex, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And I think one of my favorite things I've ever experienced at the store, and I think this speaks to hopefully the vibe and attitude of the store, is this couple came in one day and they were like, hey, we're trying to get into jazz.
That's it. Yeah.
And I was like, man, that is, I love that, you know, that's a question, because there are some record stores that if you ask that question, at least when I was growing up, be like, oh, you're trying to get into jazz. Here's some Ornette. Have
exactly.
fun. You know, like, you know, and it's going to be like, oh, this jazz, I guess jazz isn't for me. You know, it's going to shy people away from it. And, I was like, wow, it's great that you're asking that. And I was like, well, here's like 4 records. And, you know, I gave them like, you know, Root Down and, you know, Kind of Blue and, you know, a Grant Green record, just like some things, be like, what do you like? And, you know, they were like, oh, we really like this one. It's like, cool. There's a whole, here you go. Here's like 100 records that you can go buy, you know, and I don't know, that sort of like organic discovery really still is awesome. And I think is really still a big power that record stores do yield, is to turn people on. I mean, Rust and Wax in Florida just had like, I think it's called like Jazz
Explorers.
Jazz Explorers. And they all come into the record store late, like after hours, and they played the new Okonski record.
They've been doing once a month. It's pretty cool, just for jazz. So cool. They're getting more and more. They're getting like 50 people in and like that.
Isn't that down around where you are, Felipe?
Yes, it's in West Palm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a very nice store. They just moved. It's great place.
Jesse and Mel are like top tier humans. They're just nice people, and they're trying to introduce other nice people to music that they might like. And I'm like, that's
great. Yeah.
That's the whole point of this, of a record shop. So yeah, kudos to them. And they sent some pictures of the night, and it was just like everybody's having a good time, and you can like intimately discover something new, because it's really hard. On Spotify or Apple or whatever you're using, it's like there's so much. There's so much music all the time. It's like overwhelming, sort of. It's like option paralysis.
Well, that's one of the fun things that I enjoy about collecting records. I don't stream stuff ahead of time very often. Like, especially if I'm if I'm in a store and they have a record player, then I'll get like 20 records and go check them out and pick and keep what I like, which is cool. But also, it's kind of like what you had to do back in the day before the internet, man. If you bought a record and it sucked, you just had a record that sucked, man. You got fucked, dude. You know? Yeah. You got to. Maybe you eventually started liking it, right? Maybe you eventually started liking it, or you got rid of it and got something else. But
I love, like, that is the number one thing I miss about the whole release cycle process now. And like, I don't have the power to shift it, but like, man, I just miss being like, you heard one single, and that's it, you know, and you're like, I don't know what the rest is going to sound like. Or you heard no singles, you know, and you were just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy it. I'm going to give that person my $18.99 for this new CD because I trust them. And then you're like, damn, this sucks.
Right. Yeah. It's terrible.
And you're like, yo, can I
you had a pile of those too, man. You had a pile of those records too, right?
Yeah,
100% or whatever back in the day. Yeah.
And there's records that you just see everybody had a pile of, and you're like, damn, they marketed that record right. They tricked us all.
Yeah.
But
especially with pop and rock and stuff back in the day, like you would get that one song that was like great. So you'd buy the album, and then you're like, man, the rest of this album kind of sucks. It's like that one song's cool, but it's not like the rest of this at all, you know?
Yeah. Now I think you got to kind of bring it. I think you kind of have to. I think we're back in an age of like, you can't just have. I think you have to bring a whole thing to compel people. You know, I think because of the streaming format, you're sort of forced into like, you better have at least 3 or 4 bangers.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just one tune that blows up, I guess, like extremely. I mean, but like to make money as a musical artist on the streaming platforms, you got to more than blow up. You have to have like a miracle of epic proportions happen to really make a bunch of money, right?
I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
Making money as a musical artist.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I've just been reinvesting Steve's profits into some some schemes I'm into.
Yeah.
They're gonna pay out one day.
Yeah. Is crypto going?
I think. I mean, I'm not one to want to defend billionaires or Spotify or anything,
Yeah.
but we do. I mean, we as a label, we do make as a label, we make a significant amount of money from streaming services.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And obviously, we're splitting that money with artists. But I think it's almost like if you think about it, like I have a vantage point of, we release 10 records a year, and that the catalog grows, right? So as a catalog, it's a viable thing. But as an individual artist, it's streaming, to make a living from streaming, it's pretty low chance of that.
Yeah.
But we have friends that are lucky enough to they're in that situation, and it's not to say also that the streaming, even from like Steve's record, that gets taken into consideration when we're spending marketing dollars, and we're like, all right, we know we're going to make this amount of money probably, but yeah, it could always be more. Yeah, you listen on Spotify, it could always
be more. Well, we've been going for about an hour now. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. This has been really fun. We'll definitely link to the record and in the video description and to y'all's social media and that sort of thing. Felipe, you got any final questions or thoughts?
I just wanted to ask Steve what the plans for, like, are you going to be touring this album? We're going to go some cities, coming more south, or towards the country, or how's the release plans for this record?
I don't really have too much schemed on right now. The Indications are releasing an album this summer that we wrote and recorded last year. So I'm about to hit the road with them next week. We're going out to Australia and New Zealand and Hawaii, and then we're hitting Europe. We're hitting Europe right after that. So if anything were to happen, it would be this summer, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm always hoping to play out more, and like I said, I was just playing with some local folks here, and maybe we'll do some of that more, but it just depends on what kind of opportunities there are and how much time I have, because there's but
you gotta raise a child too. Gotta raise up that child.
I got a 7-month-old now, so a lot of competing interests, and and he takes the lion's share for sure. But I would love to somehow get out and do some more, and we'll see if it happens. If not now, then later.
Awesome.
Yeah, whatever you are, the indications of, if you come down here, definitely going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Nobody comes to Texas though. Literally no one. There's no jazz here at all.
Where are you at in Texas?
In Fort Worth. I mean, actually, Delvin just was here about a month ago, which is kind of cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He played about 5, and I missed it because I'm an idiot. But he played about 5 minutes from my house, which is crazy because there's just not a lot of touring jazz artists that come to Texas. Like I saw Herbie last year, but you got to be like, I don't know, like that level or something.
Right.
We have local college bands and stuff, which are cool to see.
I was gonna say, I thought being by North Texas, you guys would be silly with getting live jazz down there.
Yeah, I don't know, not so much. Maybe in Denton, I love Denton. That's where UNT is. And the record store there are great compared to everywhere else because it's college town and there's a jazz program there, so people are moving in and out and selling their stuff and all that, which is cool.
College town does yield records.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, any final thoughts from Steve, Terry?
I just appreciate you having us on, man. It's great to talk to y'all, and I hope anyone who taps in enjoys the album.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just I appreciate it very much, and encourage everybody to buy Steve's new record from their favorite local record store.
Yeah, it's terrific work, a great follow-up to Magnolia. Really, congrats, you guys. Great work there, and I hope it sells well.
Cool.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, so much.
Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see y'all next time.